Επόμενη ομιλήτρια είναι η καθηγήτρια Ταλίν Μπαριζάνη, καθηγήτρια οφθαλμολογίας στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Βιέννης, η οποία δεν θα μπορέσει να συνδεθεί μαζί μας για προσωπικούς λόγους. Είναι ταμεία στο International Ocular Inflammation Society. Είναι δηλαδή, έχουμε την ίδια θέση, αυτή είναι σε διεθνές επίπεδο. Το θέμα της διάλεξης της είναι Microbiome and Uveitis. Θα την παρακολουθήσουμε.
Kalimera. I want to thank Professor Moschus and Professor Andrudi for inviting me to your meeting today. I'm very sad that I cannot be with you in beautiful Thessaloniki. The topic of my talk is uveitis and oral microbiota, and I hope that I can reach your interest with the case that I will present to you. The gastrointestinal tract is now recognized as a major immune organ, containing an abundance of innate and adaptive immune cells, which influence immune responses locally and at distant sites. The intestinal immune system is continually exposed to antigens from food and the microbiota. The microbiome is comprised of symbiotic microorganisms whose dynamic balance is closely related to human health and regulates immunity, metabolism, and other aspects in human body. The gut microbiota has been shown to modulate adaptive immune responses, notably through induction of IgA class switching, promotion of Th17 cell differentiation, and stimulation of regulatory T cell populations. There is evidence that the gut microbiota influences innate immune responses at the gastrointestinal mucosa. Dysbiosis in the gut microbiota has been linked to multiple autoimmune, autoinflammatory disorders and cancers. Regarding non-infectious uveitis, we understand that we classify in this group a large collection of very different diseases. And what we see is that many environmental and genetic factors contribute to disease development and recurrences. Recently, susceptibility links to antigen processing genes and to genes more closely associated with innate immunity were discovered for HLA-B27. And in this context, emerging evidence is showing that gut microbiota may play an essential role in the development of uveitis. Many recent publications related to gut microbiota found associations between dysbiosis and specific uveitis entities such as VKH, HLA-B27 associated AAU, and uveitis in Behçet disease. For non-ocular disorders, the impact of oral microbiota dysbiosis on disease development is gaining more interest, but for uveitis, the role of this dysbiosis in the oral cavity is still unclear. I want to present to you a patient that I believe shows that it would be appropriate to further explore this topic.
A 30-year-old female patient was presented to me with chronic uveitis since 4 years. She was referred for therapy-refractive chronic anterior uveitis with ocular hypertension. Her onsets were always sudden, with redness, pain, and often accompanied with radiation along 5th cranial nerve and headache. She presented with granulomatous uveitis, needing topical prednisolone acetate for at least 4 weeks to resolve. Also, she showed recurrent ocular hypertension crisis with eye pressures peaking up to 50 millimeter mercury, sometimes at the beginning of the recurrence, sometimes with 1 to 2 weeks delay. There were no signs of glaucomatous changes. She was monitored by perimetry and OCT. She had no visual decline, her visual acuity being 20/20 when inflammation was under control. On presentation, her vision was 20/40 and her eye pressure was 20 using combination anti-glaucomatous therapy. She showed granulomatous mutton fat corneal precipitates with an anterior chamber with 2+ cells and 2+ flare. The iris had no atrophy signs and no nodules. The lens was clear, no cells and flare in the vitreous, and normal fundus and optical nerve head presentation. This is the slit lamp image at presentation, and this after 2 weeks of topical therapy, where you see already the beginning of the pigmentation of the precipitates, and after 4 weeks there was a full resolution of the precipitates. OCT showed no abnormalities on the central retina. She was seen in the last 4 years by 3 different ophthalmological departments and several rheumatologists, although she never had signs or symptoms of systemic diseases. Therefore, she already had been extensively investigated for immune-mediated and infectious etiologies, and all tests were negative. Also, there were no evidence of underlying systemic diseases reported. It has to be noted that she was HLA-B27 as well as 51 negative, that her CRP stayed negative over the 4 years, that ACE and lysozyme were negative, and all infectious parameters. Chest X-ray and urine status were normal, and the patient declined the procedure of an ACT tab. This is why this was not performed. She is not smoking and not taking any medicine. Her previous treatment consisted in first-line topical and oral steroids. Then several cycles of topical and oral antivirals were given, each cycle for 3 to 6 months. She needed, in addition, 2 to 3 times a year, a short course of oral acetazolamide to control eye pressure peaks. At presentation, she was treated with a fixed combination of dorzolamide timolol eye drops twice a day, brimodine eye drops twice a day, and latanoprost eye drops in the evening. Here you can see a graph illustrating her eye pressure values from March to July 2020. And you can see that in April and in July, she had 2 peaks parallel to uveitis recurrences. And there she was treated with oral acetazolamide in combination with her usual topical prednisone acetate therapy. At the second recurrence, I went over her medical and social history again, and she told me finally that she had a persistent baby tooth, which was causing her no troubles. Just to be sure, I referred her to the dentist for checkup. Here is her panorama X-ray, where you can detect that she is missing teeth in the upper maxillary arch. And when looking at this permanent milk tooth, you can see that she has a root resorption and periapical inflammation and deep pocket formation. She also showed signs of periodontitis. Before starting periodontal therapy, a bacterial flora analysis using DNA strip technology was performed, taking specimens from 4 pockets. The analysis showed positivity for 2 pathogenic gram-negative bacteria from the orange and red complexes, Tannerella forsythia and Prevotella intermedia, both known to be associated with autoimmune diseases. Interestingly, Porphyromonas gingivalis was not present in the samples. The baby tooth was extracted and the patient received azithromycin 500 milligrams orally for 7 days. Now for over 5 months, she had no recurrences. Ocular pressure normalized and anti-glaucomatous therapies were phased out with stable measurements. No further pain and blurring, and vision stable at 25/20. So is there any association? What we know so far is that the oral cavity is a large reservoir of over 700 bacterial species. There is growing evidence that oral dysbiosis can affect local and systemic autoimmune diseases. A review summarizing the actual data was just published in Frontiers in Immunology in December. Suarez and her co-authors propose 10 possible autoimmune mechanisms. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be very happy to take your questions.